All right, I want to show you a poster that became a billboard featuring a quote from a person viewers of this show should be very familiar with. The quote is from the one and only Grover Norquist. Quote, "My goal is to cut government in half in 25 years, to get it down to the size where we can drown it in the bathtub." That picture is New Orleans after Katrina. Government small enough to drown. It perfectly articulates the kind of real-world consequences of that kind of governance. And as we noted early in the week, there are lots of Republicans who say the same thing, except, of course, when it's their own district or state that will drown, and then they'll be running to the federal government for help. Thankfully, in a sea of hypocrites, there is always the last honest man, unafraid to hold to his most extreme views, even in the most extreme circumstances. Congressman Ron Paul.
I live on the Gulf Coast. We put up with hurricanes all the time. I have Galveston in my district, and FEMA is only about 30 or 40 years old. I don't know exactly how old. But the worst disaster we've ever had was in my district in Galveston in 1900. Before FEMA, the local people rebuilt the city, built a seawall, and they survived without FEMA. It should be like 1900. It should be like 1940, 1950, 1960s. It's just people have lack of confidence in how free markets work and how local governments ought to work, how neighbors should take care of themselves. It should be coordinated, but it should be coordinated voluntarily with the states.
Now, it's true that FEMA is relatively new. It was created in 1979 as a way of consolidating all the federal things the federal government did do for disaster relief into one agency. Ron Paul wants to believe that local governments and neighbors don't need outside coordination in times of disaster. But precisely because disasters are local, they reduce the capacity of local authorities to act. That's the advantage of something like FEMA. It can come from the outside to help. And it isn't as if the federal government wasn't helping before FEMA existed. For example, if we're just talking about hurricanes to hit the New York area, there haven't been many, the Works Progress Administration, the WPA, was vital to recovery after the hurricane of 1938 that hit Long Island and swept up through New England.
In 3 days, an army of 110,000 WPA workers had been shifted to emergency storm and flood duty. Every little man with a pick on this map represents 1,000 workers of the WPA. Manpower turning from regular public improvements and services into the breach in time of dire need. Where tracks remained to carry trains, thousands of these workers came by rail. Shock troops of disaster, someone has called them, because so many times in recent years they have provided the human sinews for great tasks of reconstruction.
I've been working on my newsreel voice, but I'm not going to be able to do it as well. The human sinews for great tasks of reconstruction. At a deeper level, securing citizens from the devastation of disaster is one of the foundational projects of civilization. It's a central element of the social contract that doesn't just bind citizens of a state to others in that state. It binds people in the United States to other people in the United States. Paul's comments are less about the role of government than what each of us owe to each other across the expanse of a country that occupies much of a continent.